I was with Allison Krauss when she was shot and killed on Kent State campus. We had made it a point to appear at the rally that was held that afternoon at 12 o'clock to get a little organization for the student movement that was seeming to be disorganized the night before and the day before. And we went there to see some organization take part. We were there in the beginning when they asked us to disperse under martial law, and we stayed in the center of the crowd. The guardsmen lined up in front of us, maybe 100 yards in front of us in single file, shoulder to shoulder, and started marching as they shot tear gas. The gas grenades were thrown back, and they continued marching, and they forced the students over a hill and into a parking lot where the majority of students stood and returned the gas grenades that were being continually fired. It was a continuous confrontation. Gas was shot, it was thrown back. I did see some rocks thrown. And apparently, after a while, the National Guardsmen ran out of gas. And we stood there and we chanted, and the gas just breeded hate, and it breeded indignation. And you couldn't help but feel it when they had gas shooting at you from all sides and making you move back, and you had nowhere to go and breathing gas all the time. And I uttered plenty of curses, and I felt more and more indignation as the gas was coming, and Allison did too. The guardsmen had ran out of gas, and they started marching back apparently to get more gas. At this time, the crowds moved right in behind them. People were screaming and yelling. People were filled with hate, it appeared. I don't see how anybody couldn't be. These people, the guardsmen were wearing these gas masks. You couldn't see a human face behind all the green. They were dressed in green, they carried guns, and they wore masks, and you couldn't distinguish it.
Was the crowd throwing rocks at them?
The crowd was throwing rocks when they ran out of gas. People had been shot, had gas shot at them for quite a while, and they could do nothing but retreat, and they did resort to throwing rocks.
Were they big rocks?
They were rocks maybe the size of eggs of baseballs. I didn't see any hits, and I don't know that anybody threw to hit the people, hit the guardsmen directly. I know they must have thrown out of hate and indignation.
What provocated the shooting itself?
I can't say what provocated the shooting. The crowd rushed in behind the guardsmen, screaming war whoops as the guardsmen retreated over the hill, marching in formation.
The next thing I remember is, after this was the lieutenant or captain, whoever was the commanding officer right on the scene at this time, who had a handgun and somewhat of a billy club in his hand. He fired a shot into the air at this time. And at that instance, I thought to myself it was a grenade of some type that I hadn't noticed, but I did notice that the sound was much more muffled than I would have expected from a handgun of that type. And at this time, I don't recall them turning, but I just recall the firing at this time. And a group of, in my estimation, again, 8 men, which I would say were the same men who got down in the firing position earlier, were doing the firing. And there was one man, which I would say would maybe be the second man in the row, was firing into the air. It seemed like above the other men. The other men seemed to be, the ones I could see, seemed to be firing directly. The next thing I remember is this lieutenant captain, whoever the commanding officer was, hitting the men's guns on top to make them stop firing. He was hitting the men's closest to him. He was on the furthest edge away from the building, and he was hitting the men's closest to him to make them stop, and then he was reaching across to hitting the gun butts, knocking them to make them stop, it seemed.
What were your responses, sir, to the shooting at Kent?
Well, my responses to the shooting in Kent was simply the fact that the people weren't behaving properly, and apparently they have asked for that sort of thing.
I'll tell you, the National Guard had no training to take care of any demonstration. What they should have done, they should have brought in the highway patrol, which has education, you know what I mean, to take care of anything like that. In the first place, they didn't need no National Guard up there.
You don't think that the students had to have the guard here or the campus?
That's what started it.
So where do you put the blame, sir?
I put the blame on the National Guard and on the governor. The governor is to blame.
Governor Rhodes?
Right.
Sunday, just driving around town and seeing these guys standing on a corner. I don't know what they were supposed to be doing, but there they were. Sunday night, the helicopters flying over the apartment, and the children were upset, and it seemed like about every minute and a half, a helicopter was directly overhead, very low. The building was shaking. This sort of thing helped arouse students, just as Rhodes' statements aroused students. I mean, again, the idea that there was going to be a show of strength, that these protesters, these communists, these subversive types are going to be shown, who's in command. This kind of talk that I think caused students in a way to be there and to be as persistent in staying there around that commons as they did. That was one of the reasons I was there, surely.
Do you think that the shooting of Kent, that students at Kent, was justified, sir?
Under the stress and strain, I believe both sides were in such a mood that anything could happen, and I think that's what happened, was the shooting because of the strain on both sides.
Would you put the blame then on the governor for having called the guard in the first place?
No, I think the whole fault lies in the administration of the college itself.
People in the downtown section of Kent were more than happy to have the National Guard here. We feel that some of our neighbors, the police, the firemen, families would be without providers now if the National Guard hadn't been here. We think they did a tremendous job. Our hearts go out to the parents of these 4 students, but we feel that the citizens of Kent are just as precious to their families as the students in this town.
Carol has a son in Vietnam too, and he's over there fighting, and we're over here fighting for our welfare. And my husband happens to be a fireman, and he's been gone for 3 days and 3 nights. His life was in danger as much as the students up there. Also, the students didn't obey. They were told to disperse. They didn't disperse, backed up those National Guard. What could you do?
So in a sense, then, you feel that the shooting was justified?
No, not that way. I mean, we don't want to see anybody get hurt. But the students, they want to run our country. How can they run our country when they can't even obey rules?
At one point, some person started to chant. I believe the chant was "Fuck Nixon." And as the chanting increased, people started running out of the bars. There were so many people they couldn't fit on the sidewalk anymore. People spilled out onto the street. And I have no idea who made the first move, but as the crowd increased and they spread out an area, and on one periphery, a rock was thrown through a window. And this was met with cheers and increased chanting, and the people en masse moved down towards the square of town. It's interesting to note that though this was a spontaneous thing, that the kids, at least the kids that were throwing the rocks through the windows, were very selective in what windows were hit. The stores that the kids consider their stores, that are run by students, by young people, by freaks, by long hairs, whatever you care to call them, were not hit. It was the banks, the realtors, the savings and loan companies, these kind of establishments that were hit. Police were in on the thing Sunday night. The police are doing most of the splitting up. Of course, the presence of the guard was very sobering because they did have, they're holding their rifles quite low and they all had bayonets. And that did a lot to hold things down just by the very fact that they were there. The significant portion of Sunday night occurred after the kids reached the corner of Lincoln and Main Street, and several hundred sat down in the street, and there were several hundred more on the front grounds of the campus. And it was a strange thing. The cross-section of students that all 4 of these days have involved is incredible. I can't tell you exactly what there is at the basis of the camaraderie between all the students. They're out there for many different reasons at any given time. But, you know, there has to be something in common, whether it's just age or whatever it is. I haven't been able to decide yet. We told the authorities that we weren't going to move out of the street. We weren't going to move until we did, in fact, get to talk to someone. Now, someone got up, and no one that I've talked to is sure who this person was, but we do know for sure that he was using the police PA system off of the car. Got up and said that we have contacted the mayor. He'll be down within a half hour to talk to you kids. Oh, we're trying to get a hold of someone from the university. At this point, the National Guard began to move. People assumed that they were following the orders to move off campus. But within a few seconds, it became apparent that they weren't. They had their bayonets lowered. They were marching across campus. And the 3 groups, 2 groups of National Guardsmen on either side, and the police at one end were coming in to form a group and shot tear gas and chased the kids up Lincoln Street. Now, this was the most significant thing up to this time, because a lot of the kids were left liberal. I don't know, maybe they were radical, but up till this point, their actions hadn't caught up with their heads. That night, I saw hundreds of peace signs turn to fists.
My name is James Porter, and I am a student at Kent, and I live in College Towers. And Monday afternoon, I was on my way back from a class which was canceled in University Auditorium, and I was standing by Taylor Hall. We couldn't move. I was afraid to move. I was standing there. I heard shots. Whether there were snipers or not, I don't know. I saw people falling. I fell. I didn't want to be shot. The shooting stopped. I stood up. About 35 feet away from me, there was a girl who was shot in the neck. I stood and watched her die. That's all I know. That's all I want to know now.
The guard was crouching, ready to shoot at us, and we'd realized that they'd run out of tear gas. They stood there for a moment, and then they all got up again and started moving back up the hill. The students followed, many students at a very close distance. Some of the students were like throwing rocks, but there were very few rocks thrown, and they didn't reach the guard. When the guard reached the top of the hill, some students were as close as 15 or 20 feet in back of the guard. At the time they reached the top of the hill, they stopped, suddenly turned and fired. I was about 45 feet down the hill and started running. Most people were screaming that it was blanks, but as I hit the ground in the right about the practice football field, I saw one person fall in front of me that spun, and blood was spurting out of his shoulder and fell. The shooting stopped. The guard turned around and marched down the hill, and I ran up to aid this student that had fallen. I was there for about 2 or 3 minutes trying to stop his bleeding. He had been shot all the way through the left shoulder, and I was watching by the parking gate where there was another student lying flat on the ground. I ran over to there. My brother was there and said he was dead, and ran back to the student that I'd been caring for. I was sitting by that student holding his shoulder as about 7 National Guardsmen walked up to the dead body by the parking gate and were questioning the students and looking at the body. The students yelled for the guard to get the fuck out of there, to move away. They did, and they started to walk away. One of the guardsmen turned, had his gun by his side like this, and fired another shot by the group of students at this dead body. After that, we waited for the ambulances to come and carried the wounded up onto the hill and got them ready for the ambulances.
Do you know anything about a sniper fire?
I never heard any sniper fire. The only firing that I heard was from the National Guard.
Was there any
When they reached the top of the hill, they all turned at once, and his hand was up in the air with the black nightstick in it, and he dropped his arm and he began to fire. I hit the ground as quickly as possible, and I just laid there and hugged the ground until the firing was over. Felt bullets thud around me. A piece of concrete hit me in the arm. I guess it would taken up out of the sidewalk by a ricocheting bullet. As soon as the firing stopped, I looked up, and the National Guardsmen had turned and were going quickly down the hill. They weren't even stopping to look and see if they'd hurt anyone. And everyone was screaming. He's hit. She's hit. People just could not believe that such a thing had happened. I must say I never saw or heard a sniper's bullet fired. All I saw was that command, that dropping of his arm, and I saw them fire. We went back down the hill, many of us, and sat down and just sat there. Many people were so angry they couldn't even speak. Dr. Frank finally came over to talk to the students with a bullhorn after some other professors had spoken. And he was nearly overcome with grief by the time he finished talking. Basically what he said was, please people, please leave this hillside. Please don't demonstrate. Don't harass these guardsmen anymore because they're murderers. We've seen what they can do and they might do it again. Please go home. I have military experience, and I was in the service for 2 years, and I know, I could easily identify the weapons that they were carrying and the ranks of the people there. And that's also why that makes me think that was a command to fire, because that's not so unfamiliar. When there's a lot of noise around, you don't use a verbal command. You use a visual command, like a dropping of the arm.
Are you a member of the National Guard?
Yes, I am.
And were you at Kent State on the day of the shooting?
Yes, I was.
Can you describe what took place to the best of your ability?
Well, I saw thousands of students. The majority of them were spectators from what I could see. I was standing there watching myself. I wasn't armed with a rifle, and I wasn't involved in the shooting, so I was more or less an outside observer. I saw a lot of tear gas being thrown, and the students threw it back, and then the guard threw it at the students.
Were the students throwing things at the guard?
I believe they had some sticks that I saw them picking around in the dirt, picking up stones out of the dirt, and they had some sticks from the shade trees.
Did you see them, any of them with weapons or bricks or anything like that?
No, I didn't see any bricks or spikes. Now, this is from my point of view. I didn't see any bricks or spikes.
Right. Now, when the guard went up and you saw them kneel and shoot, did you see any order to shoot?
There was so much chaos, I don't think there was an order. It's hard to tell. Those men were wearing gas masks, and through a gas mask you can't hear anything. There was a lot of screaming and a lot of hollering and yelling. I heard one shot, and then two, and then a barrage of shots.
Okay. What were your responses to the shootings at Kent, sir?
Deep sympathy, but I feel the blame has been laid in the wrong place.
Where do you feel it should be?
I think professional agitation were the murderers of the 4 students, not the National Guard. The people that made the comments to the students, they only have blanks. This is what led to trouble.
In other words, you feel there were outside agitators brought in?
I feel it. I wish I could prove it. I feel.
So you feel that the Guard were simply defending themselves and shooting the students?
To a point, yes.
Well, I work at Ohio Edison, and I know all the girls were really scared at what was going on.
You had the front windows of the place broken in?
Yes, that's right. And, well, most of the kids in the office and the men in the office feel that the students were in the wrong. And I think a lot of the kids are sticking up for the Guard, and I am personally. The 4 lives that were lost, I think it was a shame that those kids had to die for it. But if there should be some way that something can be done peacefully.
Do you agree with Nixon's policies about putting more troops in Cambodia right now?
No, I don't. And I don't think the guardsmen do either. And I don't think they really intended to kill those kids. If they're in the National Guard, it must be obvious that they don't want to go to Cambodia either.
It's a case where no matter what the cause is or the protest, we have to keep law and order. That's the way I feel about it.
Do you think that the shootings were justified then?
Well, I wish they didn't happen, but when you have violence like this, well, it has to be stopped. That's the way I feel about it.
I think it was started by the students, and I don't know, there were students or outsiders, but regardless, it was started by them, and I'm sorry about the outcome, but they should do some repenting, too.
Okay, thank you.
Guards, their own people, their own age, would turn around and fire at them. This is unparalleled in American history.
As Mr. Krause himself, near breaking point, said he couldn't hold the individual guardsmen responsible. And indeed, the faculty is aware of the stress under which the guardsmen operated. But the question is, and now I'm broadening it, why is there so much hatred and fear in this country? Why was it felt necessary for these guardsmen to be there? What is the nature of the threat? Who are the enemy?
It must be said that murder without cause, that killing without cause is murder. You can call it murder in the first degree or second degree or third degree. And then you can exempt people who are in military uniform and in time of stress. You can term it whatever you want. It is necessary that whoever was responsible for the injudicious killing of children must in some way, if not by the norms of society, they must in some way be punished. They must in some way...
Vice President Agnew, in a Washington speech, blamed the Kent State tragedy on what he called the smug purveyors of mockery and scorn who back revolution with a cultured voice.
In several recent speeches, I've called attention to the grave dangers which accompany the new politics of violence and confrontation, and which have found so much favor on our college campuses. Those dangers were not imaginary. And today at a state college in Ohio, the powder keg exploded, resulting in tragedy that was predictable and avoidable.
Agnew charged many men in power are responsible for a barrage of cynicism.
They can be found in every segment of society that helps to form the opinions of society at large, in the universities, in the media, in government, in the great professions. They are, for the most part, articulate and possessed of that smugness that comes only when one is dogmatically certain of one's essential rightness.
This philosophical, intangible violence, said Agnew, is aimed at tearing down reason, tradition, and respect.
I think it was terrible because I was alone. I was bothered with my neck for about 2 months. So all I had to do was walk the floor. I was up all night. I couldn't sleep.
Do you think that the shooting was justified at Kent?
I don't know, dear. I couldn't explain that.
Do you think it was necessary to have the National Guard called in?
I think it was. It helped out.
Dick 22.
Where's the number, sir? Generally, when they take pictures, I get a number in front of me.
You live here in Kent, sir?
No, sir.
Where are you from?
I am from Connellsville, Pennsylvania, sir.
And for what reason brings you to Kent?
I'm a barber in Connellsville, and we have a radio program daily, and I told them that I'm coming here, if the Lord permits, my day off today. That is from business, not mental. Post-Gazette writer Spriggle from Pittsburgh wrote me up as Pennsylvania Scribble. He died. So the 4 are dead, and I'm still here living and telling about it, and I hope to tell the world that how ungodly and un-American I was treated in Cleveland some time ago and other parts of the country, which is most ungodly and un-American.
I think that something had to be done about the students. I mean, I don't think it was right that they did what they did. I'm sorry that they had to die. I mean, I didn't want that any more than anybody else did. But I think the National Guard were a little bit scared. And I know the students were, and I know the students weren't throwing pebbles and stones and that stuff. They were throwing pieces of cement and stuff like that. And if I felt my life was in danger like that, I would have done something to...
Brigadier General Robert Canterbury, who is in charge of the guardsmen on the Kent campus, detailed for reporters today what the Guard's official investigation has actually uncovered thus far. According to Canterbury, there was no order to fire given to the guardsmen, that they apparently did so on their own. As for a sniper touching off the battle, Canterbury says this is still under investigation. Canterbury was then asked if the guardsman had been justified in the...
If there were a sniper, however, according to the National Guard manual, it says, snipers should be engaged only on order and by a single selected marksman or firing team. Laying down a barrage accomplishes nothing constructive and endangers the lives of innocent bystanders. That's according to the manual of the National Guard.
I just reached the top of the crest and was just over it when the volley went off. And I saw the smoke from all the guns, and it was very definite that the volley came all at once and there was no hesitation between any of the shots. That is, no shot occurred first and then the rest. The volley was all together. I turned back around, ran around back of Taylor Hall again where it had just occurred, and I saw a girl lying on the sidewalk with apparently her head had been shot into and her mouth and jaw was laying on the sidewalk and blood was running down. And then everything after that was pretty much of a total confusion.
What do you think about the shooting at Kent? Do you think it was justified?
Yes, I do. I'm sorry they didn't kill more.
Really?
Really, sir.
More of the students?
Yes, because they were warned and they knew what was happening and they should have moved out.
Well, in a way, I feel sorry for the ones that were hurt, but all those other college, and they're boys and girls, they're certainly not men and women. It would be just another Berkeley, and if that's what it took to break them up, well, then that's what it takes.
So you feel that the governor was right in putting the guard here?
All the way, definitely.
Are you...
Is that there are many people in authority, in civilian and military power, and the university itself, who simply say, well, this is very unfortunate, but those people should not have been there. And then we'll get the argument, they knew they shouldn't have been there, and by God, a line must be drawn. They were in defiance. We've had enough of this, etc., etc.
We can't have the buildings burned.
But they were there, and they were a very varied group, and I would guess practically all of them were Kent State University students, American kids. They were not the Viet Cong. They were not armed, and they were not believing that they were in danger of being slaughtered.
What do you want to know? What happened?
Yeah, what happened? To the best of your knowledge, you were right there, an eyewitness to the shooting.
We were running up the hill after them. Some kids were throwing stones. Most of us were screaming. Never expected them to turn around, never expected them to fire on us. It seemed to me like they fired on command because they all spun around at once and they went down on their knees and they shot into the crowd, into us. I was about maybe 15 feet from one of the kids who got hit in the shoulder. He fell and they just kept firing and they wouldn't let us pick him up. I don't know, maybe it was 35 seconds, maybe 40 seconds. I didn't hear anything. Maybe it was behind them. We couldn't hear. It was loud. I mean, we were screaming and yelling.
You're a student at Kent. What you want to add to it?
I think it was murder. I really do. I've never been so appalled in my entire life. They could have used any other means. They could have used a hose, a fire hose, and watered us down. They could have used anything. And to carry loaded guns it's appalling. It really is. That's about all.